Our friend has died. Please do his funeral. This raw, unexpected conversation took place right there at the baptismal font last Sunday morning as you were drinking your coffee. We had finished worship. I was just visiting with all of you out in Fellowship Hall. When I saw a man and a woman come in the building, I thought, 90 minutes late for worship? Sure, come on in. But then I realized that they looked vaguely familiar. They looked familiar because once, years ago, they had attended a funeral here. As I recall, the funeral had taken place under difficult circumstances. They remembered me. They remembered you. They remembered this building and our kindness to that family in their distress. And in their own desperation, that long ago kindness gave them hope that they could walk in this building and receive kindness for themselves as well. I asked them to tell me about their deceased friend. It was a shocking, horrible story that you can read about in the Trib. I can send you to it if you'd like. Their friend had been murdered in a particularly gruesome way. His 16-year-old daughter witness to his bloody death. These friends had no money. The murdered man had no money. They had no pastor, no priest, no rabbi, no place to go. But they had grief and deep, deep need. Though I had no way to verify the truth of their story at that moment, or to evaluate the potential risks of agreeing to this, how did I know the murderer might not show up here to finish his work? But I said, yes, of course. When shall we do this? I've told this story to a few people. Misha and Mink, you got it when it was just fresh Sunday morning, and you were the ones who said, is this safe? We didn't know. But I've been telling this story mostly to remind myself that it actually happened here. And in spite of the strangeness of the request, the circumstances of the man's death, the potential danger to us, not one of the people who I told said, why in the world would you do that? They all had questions, all had concerns. But no one questioned that, of course, we would be kind to a family in need. I was not surprised that you weren't surprised. Ascension is many things, most of which make it highly unlikely that we would host the funeral of a destitute murder victim. But among all the things we are at heart deeply kind. I'll tell you more about the funeral in a little bit. By the way, his name was Johnny. Last Sunday, we heard the opening bars of the Sermon on the Mount. You recall the scene. Jesus was surrounded by newly called disciples and newly healed crowds. He went up to the top of a mountain and sat there in the same way that Moses had centuries before sat to teach. He intended to introduce himself to the crowds. He began with what we call the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the persecuted, blessed are those who mourn. It was lovely, really lovely. I felt so blessed. But today, Jesus takes a sharp, unexpected turn, engaging in what we might call identity theology. We know a similar concept from the current political climate. Identity politics is what happens when a candidate or a party divides the herd, engages in us and them, clumps people around a common characteristic. We are no longer Republicans, Democrats, and independents. We are instead subsets of those larger parties taught to mistrust anyone, even those of our own party who do not share our point of view, our identity. Urban mistrusts rural. Poor mistrusts rich. Caucus I am sorry about the Iowa caucuses. I am still grieving. Caucus mistrusts primary. Education, race, gender. I cannot keep up with the divisions that we make among one another. And Jesus, who knows what his party affiliation would be, engages in the same sort of dividing, but without ill intent. He engages in identity theology. He says, you have a name, a stamp, a brand, and any who choose to follow Jesus must answer to that name, accept that stamp, promote that brand. You are salt. You are light. To which they said, we are what? It's not that his hearers were unclear on the concept. Salt, light, everybody knows what those things are. It's that they were not used to being called by anything but their names or professions, their obvious identities. You are Joseph the carpenter. You are Donna the organist. You are Roberta the rabbi. You are Betty the baker. But salt? Light? They leaned in a little closer. For centuries, scholars and theologians have tried to make sense of these names, imagining Jesus was saying something in a coded language, hinting at something complex that needed deciphering, parsing salt into its various uses, its chemical makeup, its role in culture, has led preachers to determine that Jesus means for his disciples to spice things up, or to preserve precious things as though brining a side of beef, or to be valuable since salt was at one time currency. You get the idea. It's tedious and a real stretch. Light was equally analyzed. What does Jesus mean? Don't overthink this. Salt is salt. It doesn't go to bed at night moaning, dang, I wish I was sriracha. Light is light. It doesn't stand in front of the mirror saying, today should it be natural or incandescent or LED? Salt is salt, and so are we. Light is light, and so are we. What would Jesus say to us today in this place? Salt? Sriracha? Our congregation is in the middle of many, many conversations about our current state of ministry and what our future might be, the trajectory of this project we call Ascension. We're asking one another, what does it mean to be faithful? What does it mean to pursue justice, kindness, and humility? At a book study here Thursday night, our little group briefly reflected on whether the name Lutheran is a good idea anymore, whether Lutheran enhances or inhibits our ministry. What do people hear? What do people think? What do they imagine when they hear Lutheran? Swedish pancakes? Norwegian lefse? German rigidity? White privilege? We did not answer that question to anyone's satisfaction. But I can tell you what that brand, what that name, what that stamp means to a family torn apart by violence, drowning in poverty, destined to struggle, grieving this and 100 other tragedies. Johnny did not identify as Christian. Johnny wasn't from Northfield. Johnny had not held an honest job in 40 years, and his friends were mostly amazed that he had not died in prison a long, long time ago. I never met him, and I will probably never see those vaguely familiar friends again until tragedy strikes again. But I know that when that happens, they will remember Lutheran, and they will remember that it was a Lutheran church that opened its doors without a single question, with no cost. And from now on, for that family, all Lutherans will be considered kind. When we engage in identity theology as Jesus did, we know exactly who we are, not in order to be exclusive, but to be very clear about our mission. When we say we are Lutheran, we are not talking about what we serve at potlucks or where our grandparents may have been born. We are saying we are sinners and we've been forgiven. We say that we have been strangers and somebody welcomed us. We say that we have been beggars and somebody put food and love in our hands. And because we are sinners, because we are strangers, because we are beggars, we know exactly what to do when a sinner, a stranger, a beggar comes to our door. We held Johnny's funeral here on Wednesday evening. We were 12 people in the sanctuary. We rearranged the chairs so it was wonderfully intimate. 9 of those in attendance were friends and family, including his traumatized daughter. Johnny's primary care physician was here, Vicar Julie, and me. The hymn of the day was a Helen Reddy song downloaded from iTunes. The flowers on the altar was a plastic bouquet they'd picked up on sale at Walgreens. The texts promised safety and shelter. The sermon was shared. I first offered reflections on the texts and then invited his friends to speak. It was powerful. It was painful. It was over in 15 minutes. The friends lingered until Vicar Julie and I had to go tend to our confirmation students. But everyone who attended pulled one of us aside. One said, "I feel so safe here." Another said, "Maybe I can hope now." Another said, "Thank you for this. You didn't have to do this." Oh, but we did. We absolutely had to. Remember the words of the prophet. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free? He said, not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover them, and not hide yourself from your own kin. We are salt. We are light. We are sinners. We are strangers. We are beggars. We are kind. We have no choice because that's who we are.